Well, it's great being here. Since I hardly get to this one. And I still don't know what I'm going to say, so you'll have to sort of bear along with me. I'm sure everybody here knows who Kitty was, but just in case, because she never talked about how much she was with Baba, how many years she was with Baba, but you heard about Baba in 1931, I think, in England, and lived many, many years in India with Baba. And then Baba asked her to stay here in 1952. And I remember Marshall saying at Kitty's funeral, which was in a church in Race Pass, people had flown in from all over, and there were so many people that they were all out on the grounds just filling up all the space. And Marshall turned to me and he said, everybody here feels that Kitty was their best friend. And that was true. So I first met Kitty in 1968 when I moved here. And I was so happy to have met her before she died. And she lived another 20 years, but she seemed so old, And well, that's the only thing I thought ahead of time to tell you. I have over the years written many stories about Kitty, so intermittently I'll read you a story because they'll be more, they'll be better than what I could just say. I guess almost everybody here has met Kitty. And the most remarkable thing as I think about her is that she spent so much time with Baba. She was in the Nasik ashram. She was on the blue bus tours. But conversations with her was always about your life. It was always about you, And it never seemed unusual to me, like it seemed absolutely the way it should be, But it was remarkable that such a great person was interested in each and every one of us in a very unusual and caring way. And this week, in thinking about what to talk about, I sat with my friend Doug, and I started reminiscing some stories. So I have a list of stories in absolutely no order. They'll jump all around. One of them was about Andy, who I've been partners with for so many years. I was sitting on the Aruba porch with Kitty, and Andy was in the compound below us, and the front porch, and they were bantering back and forth about Churchill, who was Kitty's dearest hero. She loved Sir Churchill, and the two of them were bantering back and forth. And then that evening, before she went to bed, we'd sit by her vanity, and she had the mirror, so I could talk to her in the mirror. And I was combing her hair, and she was so happy. She said, "I think I did very well with Andy today." It's one of my favorite stories. There was one time when I was in India. I'm sorry, these are going to be out of order because they're as I remember them. But one time when I was in India and I had actually lost a lot of weight and I was wearing nice clothes and earrings and things like that. And Adi Dubash came up to me. Mansari was next to me. And he said, "Now you can get married." And he said, "But I don't want to get married." And he said, "Well, Baba would want you to get married." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because somebody can take care of you in your old age." And when he left, Mansari always was saying, "Be happy, don't be married," So it was a little disturbing. So the next Merazad day, Kitty was in India, and I was in that house across from Mahara's porch. And she and May Rue were there. And so I said to Kitty, I said, Adi Dubash said that Baba wants me to get married. And she turned around to May Rue and she said, oh, gee, he never asked me to get married. Did he ask you to get married? And what's funny is that, all these, you might say, silly things, they were loving things, and they somehow or another brought everyone in her contact, including me, closer to Baba. That wasn't because we talked about the Nashik ashram or the blue bus stores or anything like that. It was always that kind of stuff. And that's so remarkable. To me, I don't understand it, but that's what it was, I'm sorry, there are two Andy ones in a row here. There was one time I was leaving for India, and Kitty came down to the airport to see me off. And as I was leaving, she said, oh, don't worry, Andy has mononucleosis. But he didn't. And I don't know why it's so endearing and why it's funny that Kitty should be that way, but she was... It's funny because she was known in India as somebody with, not a sense of humor. But she did. I mean, it was so funny. I just remember one time, I think Wendy was there and Yelton Daruba. Wendy was there and Sue Chapman and somebody else. And it was in the summertime. And there was a big sign by the fireplace, do not use the fireplace. And we figured it's because something called the flu was closed. So we rattled it up, and we said, oh, it's probably open now. And it was kind of cool, even though it was in the middle of summer. So we asked Kitty if she'd like to have a fire. And she said, yes, that'd be great. So we started making the fire, and of course the whole room was entirely filled up with smoke. And then somebody came in with water to pour over it, and that caused a lot more smoke. And we just couldn't stop laughing with Kitty. It was so funny. And then right afterwards, there was a video that she was going to watch of all of the, it was August, it was her birthday, all of the Mandali were going to wish her a happy birthday and take her on a tour of Mirza. But the house smelled like India. It was like this burning. And it was so funny. And I remember she watched the video so delighted. And then when she watched it a second time, she was actually there in India. And it was, it's not a funny story, but it's such a lovely memory. Anyway, for any of you who have ever gotten phone calls from Kitty, when she was through whatever she had to say, she'd just hang up on you, I mean, everybody was kind of used to it. It wasn't personal. And, but what she used to do is she would call up somebody named Ellen Book, and Ellen was a nurse. She was her nurse. She took care of me. But she also worked in the hospital. And so Kitty wanted to tell Ellen how she was feeling that day. So she called her up and she got her answering machine. So she left her this long message on her answering machine. And then she had to hang up. But she wasn't quite sure how to hang up, and she kept saying, I'm going to hang up now. Here I go, I'm going to hang up. And it's like she didn't want to hurt the phone's feelings. How does that bring you closer to Baba? But it does. I used to go over to Delaware on Friday nights. What had happened was somebody was cooking for Kitty, and she wasn't a very good cook. and nobody was enjoying it. So somehow or another, I was bringing Friday night dinners over, and then I'd come into the center. And so many times, especially towards the end when her health wasn't perfect, she didn't feel like coming in, but she would, get on her nice clothes, and she'd put on rouge and lipstick, and she'd put on her earrings and get all ready. She'd come in, and when she'd get home at night, she would say, "I'm so glad I went into the center." And it happened so many times, but she pushed through. It was a real good example. One of the things that occasionally would happen is that she had a way of calling up and interrupting what was happening. So one time I used to paint a lot and had a studio. And real excited, and I started painting on a new canvas, and it was all going well, and the phone rings. And Kitty said, "Would you come over?" I said, "Sure." So I changed my clothes, and I washed up, and I came over, and all she wanted to know was, how are the muses doing? But, she interrupted them. There was one time when somebody was towards the end when she was not well, and somebody came to the door of Del Rugo to see Kitty, but she really wasn't up to seeing anybody. So I said to this person, "Kitty's not well today. We really want to see her." And it was a person that said, "Well, she'll want to see me." And I said, "Well, she's just not feeling that well." We went back and forth, and then Kitty walks up behind me and greets her and said, "Come on in!" And when I told that, who was it to, Sridhar in India, who used to be the chairman of the club, he said that Bobby used to come to their house, and the Bombay group thought that they were keeping Baba from them because Baba said he couldn't see them. And the same thing would happen. They'd come to the door, and they'd say he couldn't see them, and Baba would come out behind them. Oh, God, I'm more than halfway through my stories. This was something that was very, very touching to me. There's somebody named Ruth White who used to live with Kitty. I think she lived to be 100, didn't she? Yeah. And went to Darshan, the 69 Darshan. She was 100 years old then. And Kitty was her caretaker. And I'd gone over to Daruba, and we were eating dinner on a little table in the room that was Barbara's office, across from Kitty's bedroom, by the window. And we're just eating, and there's this big commotion outside. And I think it had something to do with Ruth White. And the whole time, Kitty never broke her concentration, and she kept talking. And I was so surprised. It just, it made me feel that there was a value in me that she was saying. I didn't know about it, but she was valuing it. And I think that was the biggest thing she communicated to people, how much she valued whatever they were doing. I remember there was this one, there's a nephew of a Bible brother who lived here. He must have been a teenager. And he loved snakes. And all he was talking about was snakes. And I was in the living room, and Kitty was in her office talking to him all about snakes. She knew all about them. And it was, she just knew how to talk to people. But I think she also religiously read Time magazine, so it would keep her up on topics. Kitty, all of her life, did not sleep well at all, ever. She was always up walking at night. And she asked Bob about it. She told him she only gets 4 hours of sleep. He said, that's all you need. And there was this one time I was staying over at night there at the room. I was in what I think Buzz's office. And Kitty had, I think I was asleep. Anyway, Kitty was walking around and she comes into my room and she says, never do that again. And I said, okay. Never sleep in my bed. Okay. So I said, okay, and then she went back to her room. Oh. I wasn't going to tell this story, but it's so sweet. How was it? We arranged at one time that Kitty was going to call Monty and the women who were in Pune on a phone call, and that was like really unusual, you know. And I was there to dial and to make the connection. And they talked, and it was great. And a month or so later, Margaret had the same idea, Margaret Krynski. So I remember Billy Flowers was over there because we were recording it. And were you there, Andy? No. And she was staying in Happy House, and she called up the women who spoke on the phone. I remember they couldn't hear each other, and so one of them would say, I love you. And the other one would say, what did you say? It went on and on. And then finally Margaret got it. And she said, oh, what else is there? You know? Oh, it was wonderful. Nehara was on the phone with her. It was pretty amazing. And I had to go back afterwards to the Rubra. I think I left my pocketbook there or something. And Kitty was in bed. So I went into her bedroom because I knew she was up. And I said, Margaret just spoke to the women, you know, in India. And she looked up to me and she said, it was my idea first. Why did that get you closer to Baba? I don't know, but it does. Oh, God. I was told by Rosie, I didn't observe this, that Kitty would go to Latif's, which was a restaurant that Marshall and Rosie had that was a wonderful place to go. And Kitty loved going there. And she would take people there and treat them. And then after dinner, Rosie would come over and she would say, put this on my bill, you know, which she didn't have. And she didn't realize she didn't have it. I remember, it reminds me that I remember that the last year Kitty's health really, you know, went downhill. But she was always Kitty, 100%. And I think I was there with Dot. And because there were always two people there. There was a night nurse who was so funny. Her name was Delilah. Didn't know anything about Baba. And but she was great, but it was very unusual seeing Kitty and her finally making a connection. But she was from a completely other world. Anyway, so there were two people on in two shifts, and then Delilah would be there. And what was I saying? Oh, darn. Huh?
You said you wasn't feeling that well, but she was always 100% Kitty.
Yeah, no, I was with her with Dot. Dot had something to do with it, but I can't remember the story. But this reminds me of that as I'm getting older, I'm realizing all the things that Kitty was probably going through. I mean, she lived to be 100, that I was completely unaware of. Just unaware, you know, and she never sat down and told anybody what she was going through. Anyway, no, that wasn't it. Way back in 71, people were beginning to go to India. Just the beginning, and it wasn't that familiar, but they were going, and I knew I was not, so I went to the 69 Darshan and didn't have a very good time, so why should I go back? But then there was a rumor that Kitty was going to ask me to go to India with her. So I figured, well, under those circumstances, of course I'd go. So sure enough, I get a phone call. Kitty says, I have something to ask you. Okay. Come over. So I'm driving my car down to 17, practicing how I'm going to accept her invitation. I said, sure, Kitty, or, oh, okay, like that. And she starts out, and she said, if I go to India, would you go to India? I said, sure. She said, well, you wouldn't go just because I'm going. and she said it more slowly, not 1, 2, 3 like that. And then she had arranged for Lois Berger and me to go to India, so I was hooked. It was so funny. Oh, I remember there was one time when Kitty was going to India, and she asked a number of people to go with her, but told each one of them, keep it quiet. On that trip, there were like 50 people. And everybody was so surprised. They thought they were having their own personal trip. Oh, and I remember, how did that happen? I was traveling with, what was the name of that woman that was always buy Kitty's ticket?
Joy Miller.
Joy Miller, yes. Who said that? Yeah, Joy Miller. Anyway, so she would always buy Kitty a ticket in first class, and then whoever was accompanying Kitty would be in business, and not business, in the regular, steerage. And my only job in that trip was that Kitty, before going to India, practiced. She bought a walker, and she was trying to think what was the best walker to have in India, and she practiced with it and really pinned it down. And my only job was to take care of the walker. So we stopped in Frankfurt, and I got distracted. And people came because they were in first class to pick them up to take them to the plane. And it was sort of a whirlwind. And I was with Marshall. And so Kitty and Joy were ahead, and they went into first class, and Marshall and I were carrying all these bags and running after them, and it was all whirlwind. And then I got on the plane, and I turned to Marshall, and I said, do you have the walker? I said, well, I didn't either. And I figured, my God, I've spoiled Kitty's entire trip to India. What is she going to do? And then I figured, well, there's got to be a walker in Bombay. I'll just, let them go on, and I'll get a walker in Bombay. And then I asked the stewardess if she can ask the pilot to call the airport to see if they could find the walker. And they did. They did call the airport, but they couldn't find it. And the trip was 9 hours, and it was horrendous. I was so sure I had, really spoiled the trip. And then when we were getting out of the plane, there was Kitty and Joy Miller with the walker. Oh, damn relieved. Well, let me read you one of my stories if I can. Okay? I'll just tell you that it was the last year, and Kitty was staying, correct me if I'm not right, but I think she was staying in where Barbara's office was. That's where her bedroom was, because her bedroom would be too small. Yeah, they had to have another bed for the night nurse. And she was sitting in her wheelchair back where Barbara's desk was, and I was back in the corner near the bathroom. And Kitty was very upset. She just was not happy. And I was trying to think of what could I say to make her feel better. And I said, I thought this would make her feel better. And I said, Kitty, I've been writing. I thought you'd like to know that. And she was really happy. She said, that's wonderful. What are you writing about? And I said, oh my, you're not going to like this. I'm writing about you. And she said, she thought about it. You could see her thinking about it. You could see she wasn't happy. But she worked all the way through it. And she said, it's okay. It was she sacrificed what she really felt about it. You know? So I won't read you that story. I'll start in June. This is a description of what it was like when Kitty, this was the winter of 1990. She died in 1991, December. So it's a year. Dilruba is a universe. Kitty's vast world is contained within the bedroom, the living room, the dining room, and the front and back porches. The drama of life abounds within these walls. Kitty looks very much the same. Perhaps over the months I haven't noticed how she's changed. Although she is in a wheelchair and often rests in the hospital bed, she is all Kitty. Her strength and graciousness and enormous capacity for love and understanding show through just as strongly in these new circumstances. Kitty's fundamental devotion to the principle of harmony is so much part of her that through her illness she has made harmony happen around her. All around her had to be harmonious, or it had a definite effect on her health. This has been a constant theme the time she was in the hospital, so sick and seemingly unaware of her surroundings, through her recovery period. Everyone involved in her care has noticed this. At times, it wasn't clear what the right thing to do in Kitty's care. Everyone just did the best they could. In these circumstances, all that was important was helping Kitty, and clearly what helped her most was harmony. Kitty's belief and devotion are so great that they have transformed those around her, who apparently are there to help her. What a joke. In her ill state, Kitty is an example of increased awareness, not diminished awareness. A portrait of Dilruba is not complete without including Kitty's suffering. I don't have the capacity to understand it or even convey a part of it. The privacy and silence and aloneness of her battle echo with the sounds of suffering that are part of real love. She doesn't speak of it, but it sometimes wears her down. We witness the effect of its fire. She is very brave, and she is alone with it. There is such a dignity in this universe called Dilruba, to walk through the front doors to enter a vibrant world of only him and his Kitty. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that was true for everyone. It was that. Mm-hmm. In Kitty's bedroom, she had pictures of everybody. Remember, she asked people for their pictures, and it was like her family or something. I don't know how to say what it was, but there were little pictures of people that she loved. It was so nice. So I made sure I gave her one of me. I'll just read one more and then try to think of something. This evening, music is playing. It's dusk. The warm yellow light is bathing the wet trees outside. All day long, we were absorbed by her regal beauty as she rested in her wheelchair. Her long white nightgown flowing down the curve of the chair. Her newly brushed hair surrounding her pale, relaxed face. Her arms resting on the white lamb's wool cushions. Her legs covered with a knitted white blanket. One night last week, she said to me, "Am I doing this badly?" No, Kitty, I said. You are an inspiration. I really look up to you. Can you find someone else? She asked, and then repeated it again. But how to find the strength to live without such a friend? Who will be amused by my funny stories? Who will see me who's in my heart? Who will see who's in my heart? Who will believe I can sing his song? Who will expect me to? Without such a friend, there will be the work only, joyless, beautiful, and long. I think that Kitty believed in us more than we believed in ourselves, that believed that we would do the greatest things. It's amazing what Baba knew when he asked her to stay. I'm just going to read some more, and then if anybody has like a story, it would be great to hear. When I first came to the center, I didn't know anything much about Kitty or what went on there. I did know that following Baba meant being helpful, so I kept sweeping the original kitchen floor, although hardly anyone was staying on the center, so it wasn't really dirty. At some point, Kitty came into the kitchen, noticed what I was doing, and said, "Why don't you go to the book house and read a book?" Immediately, I interpreted this to mean that I wasn't good enough to even sweep the floors. But, Kitty continued, first, go up to the cabin on the hill and get a volleyball from the closet on the porch and bring it to me for the Children in Happy Club. Was I thrilled, redeemed just in time and allowed to do something. I remember the first time I visited the center, I had no idea about anything. Like all of us probably when we first came to the center. And I met Marshall, and we went to, I forget what the cabin's called, but anyway, it's right near the guest house going towards the kitchen. Huh? Yeah, log house. We sat on the porch, and he told me about Kitty, and he said, if you ever have a chance, look in her eyes. They're great. And then she asked me for lunch at Del Rubik in the back porch. And I had no idea who she was, but I did know that I should look in her eyes. And so I did. And whatever this means, she was looking inward. She was not looking out. And she turned around and she said, I think I'll ask you to play an audio tape tonight in the kitchen because I think you can do that. And that started an working with audio tapes of Baba talks that I did for years and years and sent them to Baba, and Baba heard them and started them. She started it, and she did that with I think so many people. Although the opposite was also true. I was once on the porch and somebody was in her office talking, and you couldn't help but hear some of it. And all I could hear her saying to the person was, well, that's a good idea. You go back to school and study that, and that's good. Well, maybe not. You think you want to, whatever it is, climb mountains. I know, whatever it is. And then I'd hear her say, yeah, that's a good idea. Fine. And she went through 100 ideas with this person who kept changing his mind. But everybody was looking to her, for advice, or something. And she really did not have that much worldly experience, but she had incredible good sense, and she had Baba as her guide. She once told me, if I remember what I say to you, it's from me. But if I don't remember what I say to you, it's from Baba. But I did not keep asking her, do you remember that? Oh, God. I'm sure I have more stories, but I'm sure there's things to remember. But I'll fall back. But I remember when Drew came down to the center. I didn't see her first visit, which I understand all she did was cry the entire time. However, Drew and I started getting together because Drew knew all about video and I didn't, but I thought I had something to say through video. I was fascinated by telling stories. So we started collaborating. Kitty loved the connection. She told me it always worked through, always. And we do. Anyway, I just thought I'd tell you that. Oh, but I do remember, Drew and I did, I think it was a video for Kitty's birthday. What was it, Drew? It was where we did the McNeil Lehrer report.
Del Ruben Days for her 99th birthday.
Okay. Well, Kitty loved it used to be called the McNeil Lehrer report, and now it's PBS NewsHour. And nobody was supposed to ever call Kitty between 6 and 7. Ever. Because she really liked it. And so we put together this video in which we imitated the McNeil Lehrer report. Marshall was the newscaster, was one of them. And then, they would have these, the stories like next to the person who was newscasting it, like a video. You could see it. So Marshall was announcing the great news that Kitty Davy was 100 years old, and I don't know. It was a very funny thing. I was sitting there, and Kitty was always sitting here, and it was dark in the room, but I was looking at her to see how she was taking it in. She was amazed. She was like, that's so wonderful. And I remember also on her 100th birthday, it used to be on the Today Show, in the mornings they would announce, the special birthdays. And so somebody wrote in that it was Kitty Davy's 100th birthday, and I knew they were going to announce it. I was hoping they'd announce it, so I recorded it and then played it for Kitty, And the man said, "It's pretty Kitty Davy's 100th birthday." Something like that. That was so exciting. I think it was more exciting for everyone else. She didn't care. Oh, God. It really, she just made life charged, which it usually isn't, but it was, I couldn't wait to come home to see if there'd be a message on my answering machine for her, like to go out and get some milk or something like that, if she was short of something. And it was so exciting. I saved all of those, because it used to be that the telephones would record them, And one time when, I don't know if you remember, Monty wrote a song. What was not Close the Doors. She wrote a Baba song. And wrote, huh? Open up the doors. I'm not close the doors. I was never very good at music. Anyway, Monty wrote the words, and she also wrote a melody, but she invited everybody else to also to write music. And Kitty got it, and she called me up. And Monty had written the music. There was like a sheet music there of the melody that Monty had done. And Kitty was on the phone. I pray I have a recording of this. On the phone, trying to sing the song, reading the sheet music, like, open the door. Oh, God. Which was just an example that she was just simply brave. There was nothing like, well, you might not like this, but there was none of that, And it was such an example. Like if you ever ask her how she was, she'd tell you. She wouldn't just say, oh. And that was so impressive how she was just there with you. It was a real example. Yeah. Anyway, Well, this is a silly story, but it was a way of remembering this time. I used to sleep over at night towards the last year. And this was a month before she died. A month before Kitty died, she called me up late one Monday evening. I was just about to leave for her house. I was scheduled to sleep there that night as well as Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Kitty said, "I'm going to take you up on your promise. Would you sleep over tonight?" I said, "Yes, Kitty." "Will you sleep over tomorrow night?" "Yes, Kitty." "And the next night?" "Yes, Kitty." "Oh, you've made me very happy," she said with music. I was so happy when she hung up, I wanted to sing. You know, she was just asking me if I was going to come, and I was scheduled to come anyway, you know. But really, she had a way of making something great that was just ordinary. I mean, everybody has a million stories about Kitty because she did it with people. This one is about how food played a role in Dilruba. Major role. Time with Kitty is so richly textured. Along with her newfound confusion is a clarity that wasn't there before. And the imprint of her endearing personality more and more marks life around her in Dilruba. Food, for instance. Kitty loves food. Dilruba, Kitty, food, and love for God all blend together into one. Food madness is part of Dilruba. Did you experience that too? This primal call hovers in the hallways, just waiting to nibble on the superficial armor protecting the poor helpers who may, just for a moment, allow themselves to share Kitty's extreme delight in a cookie. Curtains, it's all over. The ferocious, ever-present food monster eats another victim. Suddenly, within the helpless worker, cowering and swirling needs are formed. For chocolate, meat with gravy, for dried apricots in the jar by the toaster, for cookies in the two-tier tin, for the ham waiting in the second icebox, or half a croissant left over in the first. I first witnessed this in someone else besides myself a few years ago when I watched Ellen, that's Ellen Book, her nurse. Ellen dashed through the living room to the apricot jar in the kitchen before saying hello. With relief, I identified my own distressing obsession with candy bars and Dilruba as a shared malady. Likewise, for years, I looked forward to cooking Friday night meals for Kitty. It was always the same: fish, asparagus, rice, rolls, and fruit. I was afraid to change the menu because she seemed to like it so much. It gave me pleasure to watch Kitty from the corner of my eye, enjoying her food, and was a treat to be part of such a wonderful celebration. Last week, when Dot called me up to come over because Kitty was so distressed, it was not surprising that food played a part in the solution. Kitty was very, very upset when I got there, distraught mostly because of the disagreements she felt she had that day. As a last resort, we got Jane on the phone, hoping to clear up the matter. "Dear," said Kitty on the phone, "I'm sorry if I said anything wrong. I apologize." "Yes." "Yes, dear. Yes." Dot and I wondered what was being said on the other end. Whatever it was, Kitty's mood was improving. "Yes, dear," Kitty continued, "but is it boiled, ham, or baked?" We both silently collapsed in laughter. To experience Kitty's charm is better than eating. She nourishes the soul with deep delight. It's so true. I remember Lois Breger always wanted to cook for Kitty. You know, I cooked on Friday night, and Lois had this special meal that she would make of, I think it was macaroni and cheese. I'll say it's that. I think it was that. And I couldn't go one Friday night, so I called Lois, and she came over. And she made Kitty her macaroni and cheese. And when they were leaving to go into the center, Kitty turned around to Lois and said, "That was wonderful fish." Does that make you closer to Bob? Oh, God. I remember this one time, Kitty was always aware that she wasn't technologically astute, and it bothered her. And when she first got a portable phone, it was this big challenge on how to learn how to use it. And we were in the living room in Brooklyn, and she was at the end by the fireplace, and I was by Buzz's office. And she decides to call somebody on the phone. She's talking, and she hung up, and she said, "You couldn't hear a word I said. I hit the mute button." God in heaven. Oh, God. This is a long one. I'll skip that one. This is a short one. Someone was counting the cookies, and someone else was planning to bake 24 muffins in the morning for the church group that was coming. Kitty wasn't sure why they were coming, but arrangements had been made. She had not been feeling well, feeling fatigued and depleted overall. "You know, Kitty, you don't have to do this. You can say, 'No, I won't,'" quipped someone in the room, disguising the dare with humor. Suddenly, her eyes sparkled with a flash of mischief, quickly replaced by an ocean of strength that seemed to come from him. It was only the other people in the room who were diminished by her condition of servitude. It's kind of hard to get that, but that's what it was. This isn't really a story, but I remember yes, this is a story. One of the people that she absolutely adored was Marshall. She just liked him. And so did I. And, there was one night, toward the end, Kitty just really didn't like going into bed at night because she couldn't sleep. And she was up in bed, and she wasn't feeling well. The nights were horrible for her. And it was time for whoever was on duty then to put her to bed, get her to bed. And they couldn't, so they called me up to come over. So I came over, and she was on the porch with her walker. Her back was to the door for her office, and I was facing her. And I was trying to coax her into bed. And then all of a sudden, this enormous smile filled her face. And I turned around, and there was Marshall behind me. And every time I saw him, I told him that story. It was so sweet. I remember when I first moved here. Oh, I gotta tell you why I moved here. I'm sorry, I'll tell you the other story after. When I was visiting here, it was the second time I had visited. It was in the summer. And 68, I think. Yeah. And we went out to eat, and over dinner, Kitty said, somebody named Gary, nobody here knows him, but in New York was planning on moving here. Nobody was really moving here then. And Gary and I didn't get along at all. He was put together Mayor Bob's Monday night lovers newsletter. And I was supposed to print it, but even if I saw a mistake, I couldn't correct it. It was his newsletter. And so we were always like this. And I got so annoyed that Gary was going to move down here. So I told him, well, so am I. That was the only reason I moved down here. And she got it wrong. What she meant to say was that Bruce Hoffman was going to visit this summer. Oh, God. Oh, God. But she had ways of getting things done. Oh, God. What was the other story I was trying to tell you? I can't remember. Okay. I was using a car that used to belong to a salesman at the press, and so it had a phone in it. It didn't work, but it had a phone. And it was before people had phones in the car. The portable phone in the car was a leftover from the previous owner, a printing salesman. Although the phone didn't work, I felt pumped up by its presence on the dashboard. This was several years ago before they were common. I wouldn't have known how to use it even if it were connected, but hoped that someone along the highway would see me and think that maybe I was someone special. It was disappointing that Kitty never noticed the phone as many times as she had been in the car. I was with Kitty when the call came that Margaret was very ill and that's Margaret Crass, taken to the hospital. She and Margaret went back a long way in London when they both met Baba together in the 30s for the first time. In India, where they lived in Mehrabad, surviving the desert heat and rigors of spiritual training. Margaret was accomplished in the world. She had been ballet mistress of the New York Metropolitan Opera and danced with Diaghilev in Paris. She had a spicy sense of humor and could almost always get the best of Kitty. My dear, Margaret would say about Kitty's long conversations with people who came from all over to talk with her. If you can't say it in the first 10 minutes, it can't be said. Kitty was not known for her quick humor and often felt victimized by Margaret's dry wit. Their ties, though, were long and deep, like the bond between soldiers who, after life in the trenches, had such exhaustive knowledge of one another that inflated posturing was just not possible. Kitty asked me to drive her to the hospital right away. Wanting to know more about Margaret's condition, she turned towards me, finally noticing the phone in my car, and asked if I'd call the hospital. Of course, I couldn't. The phone was only a prop. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. I remember when Kitty was, she had an operation within the last year and a half of her dying. Yeah. So she was like 99, 98, 99. And she was recuperating. She got through it. And as she was getting better, again, Dot and I were on the roadside together. And we were trying, maybe Dot said, would you like to go for a drive? And Kitty said, can I? You know? I said, yeah. And she said, where will we go? I remember Dot saying, you could go anywhere you want. She was so happy. That was worth more than just taking the drive. This isn't a great story, but it's memorable. Ellen Brooke would let the women in India know every couple of days how Kitty was doing, and she would write it out so that it was clear. I'm not sure if I called them or somebody called them, but they would know, get a date. And Ellen wasn't there, and it was, for some reason I felt we had to call the women and tell them how she was. So I called up the phone in the trust compound in Ahmednagar. And Val answered the phone. And I said something like, Kitty is better. And he said, Kitty's dead? And I was just shouting to the phone, no, she's better, she's better. that was the end of the conversation, but it was like, anyway, it was memorable. Some of these I can't remember, so it's fun for me to remember them. This one is called Mastery and Servitude. No matter how bad it got around Kitty, no matter how bad it got around Kitty, you never stopped believing in heroes. Colorful earrings dangled from her large earlobes. Knitted half gloves warmed her arthritic fingers. In the mornings, Kitty carefully selected outfits from her favorites in the closet. The green silkish blouse, the pink or the white one, the green pants, slacks or blue ones, topped sometimes with a sweater or knitted vest. On special occasions, she wore the embroidered jacket from China with the mandarin collar, looking eerily Chinese in it, especially with the jade earrings and pendant that Elizabeth brought back from one of her trips. Kitty really did like dressing well. She also liked listening to people. Groups often gathered in the living room of Dilruba, her home. Seated on stuffed chairs, little stools, on the big couch, people from all walks of life told her stories about the little miracles in their lives. Dilruba really belonged to Elizabeth, who, like Kitty, heard about Baba in the 30s and lived with him in India. When Baba asked Kitty on his last visit from India to stay behind in Myrtle Beach to help Elizabeth run the center, she wondered what she had done wrong. She served Elizabeth in many ways. It was natural. Elizabeth was a world traveler and pioneering spirit. In her early years, she explored the North Pole, and during World War I drove an ambulance on the front lines. Later, she sailed to Russia and China on long cruises. When she was away, Kitty gave parties at Dilruba, luncheons, teas, evening meals, gatherings of all sorts. Without the restraints of Elizabeth's tolerances, Kitty soared in her element. During these intervals, her brilliance seemed to explode into the bloodstream of the Myrtle Beach Baba community, till Elizabeth returned after a month or two and set things right. Putting the frenzy of these interludes to rest for a while, reinstituting the routines of running the center. Although her spark never left when Elizabeth returned as Lord of the Manor, she no longer was in charge and often was in the wrong. Watching her balance her life with Baba within these confines introduced new vistas of what was possible. Before I knew of Baba, I used to paint large abstractions, very large and very abstract. To my surprise, 15 years later, the urge to paint returned. At this time, Kitty asked me to paint her portrait. So every Saturday morning, for weeks, she came to my studio to sit for the painting. It was smallish, about 2 feet by 3 feet, with bright and unusual colors applied in thick, broad strokes that captured, I thought, a special quality I sometimes saw in her, a kind of sadness, and aloneness, an incredible strength. When I presented her with the finished painting, I felt like she liked it. At least she liked that I did it. Months later, when opening the closet in her bedroom, I found the painting hanging inside the door. Kitty, why is this painting hanging inside your closet? I asked her. Well, she said, Elizabeth was not feeling too well, and I didn't want to make her any sicker. So Kitty found her own way of maintaining harmony in the household while still keeping the integrity of her own celebration intact. An intriguing compromise that straddled the worlds of servility and loving service. When not blinded by my own ordinary vision, I realized I was witnessing something great. Her ever-deepening awareness of Baba's companionship was a magnet that drew many into his orbit. Through her enchanting exuberance, though her enchanting exuberance overflowed when Elizabeth was away, brief glimpses of her uncontested solitude quietly marked the nearby community in a more lasting way, as a witness to the daring abandon of becoming his, giving life to Baba's words, mastery and servitude. No matter how bad it got around Kitty, you never stop believing in heroes. Wouldn't it be nice if you just walked in here? Oh, boy. But on the other hand, somebody of Kitty's incredible stature, if she was ever asked to give a talk, which was often like on Amortite, she would talk in the barn. She spent weeks and weeks on those talks and had them, I think Lois Brager would type them up, or maybe you did, and she would practice them, and she was very nervous about them. That was somebody who was like, was so big, Go figure. In fact, when I started to tell you, and I digressed, we did end up calling the women Mandali. They were in Pune. It was Mehra, probably Mehru, Goher, and Mani. And I had to make the call and set it up. But before the call, Kitty was so nervous. She had me write on the back of an envelope, number 1, hello, dear Mehra. How are you? Can you imagine? That was what was so stunning, is that you could not help but see her greatness and her love. But she was just this person that was nervous about doing talks. It was a very endearing combination. Yeah. I always got a call. One of the things that was very important in Dilruba was that Kitty loved half and half. And we always made sure there was half and half. And I remember one morning getting an emergency call from Bob Brown, who was there. We're out of half and half. Quick, get some. And it was serious. Oh, God. Sorry, there's one I want to find. Because I won't. Oh. Well, I'll try to remember it. When Mehra was taken very ill, she was dying. And Mani wanted Kitty to hear from her. And it was real important to her. So that we arranged, before this, the day before, I was in Dilruba, and out of the blue, Kitty had the mailing list of the center, which is sacrosanct. You don't share that. And she gave it to me. She said, "You'll take this." So I took it home. Well, that night, it was arranged that Mani would fax me a letter to Kitty about Mehra. I'm sorry, I can't remember if she was just taken very ill or she did die. She had died. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because it was May 20th. Anyway, so I went into work waiting for the fax to come, and I was going to go tell to Kitty. And for the first time ever, I was in a meeting, and the person in the front office decided not to interrupt the meeting when the fax came. And so when the meeting was over, there was the fax until it was late. And I grabbed it, jumped into my car, and raced to the window. And I remember getting into Briarcliff and the policeman stopped me and I said, it's an emergency, get out of here, and he did, and I raced there, and as I walked into the office, Jane was dialing, who was it she was dialing somebody in India, in Pune, to find out what was happening. There must have been murder. And I just burst in there, and I said, hang up the phone. I have it here from Monty. Here, it's for Kitty. To hear. So they did. And I read it. And Kitty completely changed. I never saw her like that. She didn't look like the Kitty that we knew, but she looked, and the only words I have for her, she looked like an ancient friend of the Avatar. She just withdrew. She knew that, and it probably was that her had passed on. And she just got very quiet, and she went into the next room. And I realized, like, the Kitty that we knew, that was so, did all these things, that was not all that was there. It was stunning to see that. So I won't read you that story. I don't even know. Oh my goodness. Have I been? Oh my God. I'll just read a story and that'll be the end. I went over an hour. This one is called Don't Wait for Me to Ask for the Music. My own engine sputtered for a while after she died, slowly coasting to a halt. Kitty had become my Jiminy Cricket, and I was at a loss how to move on without her there on my shoulder. Her help was often surprising and even maddening. Sometimes, during the exhilaration of planning a new project, she would sadly speculate whether the work would really get done or become sidetracked, or worse yet, get done by someone else first, a failure far worse than this. One time, she called me to come over when I was I had told you this, when I was painting in my studio, interrupting the exciting momentum of new images just forming on the canvas, from the pulsing area broadly brushed with colors. I changed out of my painting clothes, washed up a bit, and stepped out in the cold to drive over to Aruba. As I entered her living room, warmly lit by the crackling fire, she sweetly and innocently looked up at me, inquiring, and how are the muses doing? She also interrupted depleted moments. One time, right after Andy, my partner, was stricken with pneumonia and taken to the Myrtle Beach hospital, I was struggling to meet our business deadlines during his unexpected absence. She sent a note in the mail that read, I didn't want to interrupt you during a busy day at work, so I thought I'd write a letter to catch you up on some of the news. At which point she let me know about many people who had recently gotten sick and died. I didn't know if it was the relief of not having been struck yet, or the contagious vigor of her efforts to stay in touch that enlivens my sagging spirits. Because of those times and thousands of others, I never felt alone on my journey. Her companionship, so hidden with wisdom, filled me with even more momentum. I knew my small world had been intercepted and enlarged by something great and wonderful. But who sat on Kitty's shoulder? Who stopped her from feeling sad? Who interrupted her world? Of course she did, Baba. That's what struck me when I recall her saying, a few months before she died, don't wait for me to ask for the music. He's there on my shoulder too, waiting to make me his. I just remembered one thing I forgot to say, is that time when Mara passed on, because I had the center mailing list, I was able to, with Ann Collin, call everybody in the country. We went down, it was hundreds of people to tell them about Mary. So it was so ironic. Not ironic, that's not the word. It was so Kitty. Anyway, that's...
Thank you.